I was still trying to decide if the floor of the lawyer's office was as ugly as I remembered when the bombshell dropped. My name is Lucas Wyatt, 29, and I had just inherited something I never asked for an island. Not a metaphorical one. A real moss-covered, storm-battered chunk of rock and trees off the Oregon coast. And sitting across from me with a smirk so smug it could melt ice was my Aunt Sylvia. She was dressed like she was heading to a gala, not a will reading, and she had the audacity to cut off the lawyer mid-sentence. "I'll take care of selling it," she said, like she was discussing a casserole recipe. Lucas doesn't need it. That sentence hit like a slap. I blinked at her, then turned to Mr. Anders, our family lawyer, for as long as I could remember. His expression didn't change, calm, neutral, unreadable. I opened my mouth to speak, but Sylvia beat me to it again. "Come on, Luke," she continued, voice sweet but condescending. "It's not like you can manage a whole island. You've got..." "What, a freelance job and no long-term plan? I have buyers. Let me do what's best for everyone." It was so absurd, I almost laughed. This was my grandmother's will. The one who raised me when no one else would. The one who taught me to tie my shoes, ride a bike, and bury pain deep where no one could find it. Before I could answer, Mr. Anders quietly pulled a second envelope from his briefcase, thicker than the first, sealed with my grandmother's signature purple wax. He placed it on the table like a grenade and gently broke the seal. "Actually, Sylvia," he said, unfolding the papers, "you won't be selling anything." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," he read, voice steady. "To my grandson Lucas, I leave Raven Rock Island in its entirety. He is the sole legal and moral heir. Should anyone attempt to interfere, be it through manipulation, litigation, or pressure, they forfeit all remaining rights and assets left to them." Silence. Sylvia's face twisted like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "That's ridiculous." She was old, confused. She was clear, Mr. Anders said. "The will is binding, reviewed, and witnessed. Any interference voids your portion. That includes the townhouse, Sylvia." The color drained from her face. "You're saying if I try to sell the island, you get nothing," he said simply, "not a dime." I expected her to argue, to scream. But instead she stood up, straightened her blazer, and gave me a look so sharp, I swear it cut the air. "This isn't over," she hissed. And I believed her. The phone calls started 3 days later. Blocked numbers, unknown names, all asking the same thing. "I heard you inherited Raven Rock. Beautiful place. I have clients who'd pay well." "I never listed it," I said to one man. "Oh, I know," he replied. "But I heard you're open to options." I wasn't. I hung up. More calls came, some polite, some pushy. One left a voicemail that chilled me. Islands can be a burden, especially when they're so isolated. That was the moment I knew. Sylvia. This was her way of playing dirty. She couldn't touch the will, so she tried to surround me with noise, hoping I'd cave and hand it over. But I'm more stubborn than she remembers. Then it got worse. One morning, a thick envelope showed up at my door. Legal firm I'd never heard of. Inside, a formal challenge to the will. Sylvia was claiming my grandmother wasn't of sound mind, that I was manipulating her, that she, Sylvia, was the better candidate to manage the island. I called Mr. Anders immediately. "She's reaching," he said. "It'll never hold. But we'll have to fight it anyway." Weeks passed. Court hearings, paperwork. Sylvia showed up looking like the victim in a soap opera, dabbing fake tears and telling the judge I was a confused, unstable young man unfit to inherit valuable property. But she didn't expect the final blow. At the last hearing, Mr. Anders pulled out a USB and handed it to the judge. It was a video. My grandmother, sharp, stern, alive. "If you're watching this, Sylvia's doing exactly what I knew she would." Sylvia's mouth fell open. "I didn't forget you," Grandma said, looking straight into the camera. "I just knew what you'd try. The island belongs to Lucas. Try to take it, and you lose everything." The courtroom was dead silent. Then Mr. Anders handed over one final document, a clause in the will stating that if Sylvia contested the inheritance, she'd be responsible for repaying every cent she had ever taken from Grandma's accounts. Vacations, luxury items, trust withdrawals, all of it. The judge upheld the clause. Sylvia screamed, cursed, stormed out like a child denied dessert. But I knew this wasn't over. Because Sylvia, she doesn't lose quietly. And I hadn't seen the worst of her. Yet. You'd think after being humiliated in court, losing her inheritance, and being slapped with a massive repayment demand, Sylvia would crawl back under whatever designer rock she came from. But no. That woman doesn't retreat, she recalibrates. A week after the judge threw out her lawsuit, I decided to visit Raven Rock. I'd only seen the island in old photographs, wild cliffs, thick forests, an abandoned lighthouse my grandmother always said was haunted, but probably just needed wiring. I wanted to walk it, touch the ground that was mine now, maybe feel something that connected me to her. The moment I stepped onto the dock, I knew something was off. There was another boat already tied up, sleek black and definitely not mine. I froze. The wind carried only the sound of waves, but something in the air buzzed with warning. I scanned the tree line and caught a flicker of movement. Someone disappearing deeper into the woods. I called out. Nothing. Pulled out my phone, no service. Of course. The island had always been a dead zone. My heart thudded in my chest. I didn't want to be paranoid, but paranoia is just survival wearing a nicer outfit. Near the old caretaker's house, I saw a sign nailed to a tree, big block letters screaming, "Get out." Below it, a rotting fish impaled with a rusted knife. Whoever left it wasn't trying to be subtle. I took photos, got back in my boat, and headed straight to the local sheriff's office. Small-town law enforcement isn't built for Gothic Island drama. They shrugged. Could have been teens. Could have been a prank. One guy even suggested it might be a fisherman's twisted joke. I left their office more frustrated than afraid. Deep down I knew. Sylvia was behind this. She'd lost the courtroom, so now she was playing dirtier. Psychological warfare. The scare tactics didn't end there. That weekend, my apartment buzzer rang at midnight. When I checked the hallway cam, no one was there, but taped to my door was a flyer with a fake listing, Raven Rock Island. Private sale, no questions asked. It had a burner number. The next day, the same flyer showed up in my mailbox. And in my inbox. She was trying to stir chaos, make me feel unsafe, cornered, overwhelmed. But I'd spent too many years letting people walk over me, too many years pretending I was okay being the quiet one, the invisible one. Not anymore. I called an old friend, Marcus. Ex-military, now works private security. I told him everything. Without hesitation, he said, "I'll come with you." We returned to the island together 2 days later. This time we weren't just visiting, we were investigating. We set up motion-sensitive cameras around the house and near the dock. Marcus did a full perimeter check while I documented everything: the sign, the fish, the odd scratches on the back door lock. That night, the wind howled like it was warning us to get off the island. Around 2 a.m., I woke up choking on smoke. The fire alarm blared. The hallway was a tunnel of black haze. I ran to Marcus's room shouting. We barely made it outside before the flames swallowed the front of the house. And then I saw someone, a figure dark and fast disappearing into the woods. We didn't chase them. We didn't have to. The cameras caught everything. A hooded person creeping around midnight, pouring liquid along the wall, striking a lighter. It wasn't enough that Sylvia wanted the island, she wanted it unlivable. The sheriff's office suddenly got very interested. They took the footage and started a full arson investigation. I named Sylvia as my prime suspect, but when they tried to question her, she was gone. Vanished. Her condo emptied overnight. Her bank accounts drained. Like a magician's final act, she disappeared into smoke just like the front of my house. It didn't make sense. Sylvia had spent months, money, and emotional capital fighting for Raven Rock. She'd embarrassed herself in court, burned every bridge. And now she was gone. That wasn't just desperation, that was fear. I couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus said on the ride back. People don't run like that unless they're scared of more than losing money. So I hired a private investigator. Marcus knew a guy, Harlan, retired NYPD, now doing private work. The man looked like he ate lies for breakfast. I gave him the file, everything I had on Sylvia, and watched his eyes narrow. "Let me guess," he said. "She lived big, but her income didn't match." Exactly. Sylvia always had a new car, new purse, luxury vacations, yet no stable job after her third divorce. Harlan got to work, and he found gold. Sylvia wasn't just broke. She was drowning in debt, credit cards, maxed properties, mortgaged to the bone. And worse, she'd taken out loans from people who didn't care about court orders. People who break bones, not contracts. It all clicked. She never wanted Raven Rock because it meant something to her. She needed it sold fast, liquid, clean money. The court loss didn't just cost her a house and a bank account, it cut off her last escape plan. And now she was on the run. But desperation makes people sloppy. And I had an idea. I asked Harlan to start a rumor. We posted anonymously on a private real estate forum, owner of Raven Rock considering private sale. Cash only. No brokers. It was bait. And less than a week later, someone took it. A blocked number called my burner phone. "I heard you might be selling." A woman's voice. Calm. Too calm. I didn't speak. Just listened. Then she said, "Lucas, I know it's you, Sylvia." I almost laughed. The arrogance. The entitlement. She was still trying to manipulate me, but I let her talk. I pretended to consider. I told her maybe. I made her think she still had a shot. Meanwhile, Harlan looped in the police. We arranged a sting, a private meet. One she thought was real, one she thought would save her. When Sylvia walked into that warehouse looking like a woman who hadn't slept in a month and carrying a fake briefcase full of God knows what the cops closed in, she didn't even try to run. She just stood there glaring at me like I had betrayed her, like I was the villain in her fantasy. But Sylvia's secrets didn't end with arson and fraud. She was wanted in 3 states for identity theft, tax fraud, and embezzlement. The fire. Just the final spark in a dumpster already burning. As they cuffed her, she hissed, "This island ruined me." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, you did." I thought it would feel like the end, the arrest, the charges, the headlines about a disgraced socialite unraveling her own life with greed and lies. But it didn't. It felt like an intermission. Sylvia was in custody, sure. Her trial would take months, maybe years. The legal system moves like molasses in winter. But I wasn't waiting for closure. I had an island to rebuild, a house turned to ash, and a memory of my grandmother that deserved more than smoke and scorched timber. I went back to Raven Rock 3 days after the arrest. Alone this time. Marcus offered to come, but I needed to stand on that ground without backup. Not because I was brave, but because it was mine now. I had to stop treating it like a burden someone left me and start seeing it for what it really was, a gift meant to be used, not defended. The dock was quiet. No more mystery boats, no footprints in the sand but mine. The house, or what was left of it, still reeked of burned wood and melted dreams. I stood in the center of the rubble where the living room used to be and closed my eyes. My grandmother's laughter used to echo through these walls. She'd hum while peeling apples, curse under her breath when the power went out during storms, and tell me ghost stories about the lighthouse that never felt like fiction. I started rebuilding that week. Not just the house, my mindset. I hired locals, people who remembered her, who respected her legacy. Some brought old tools, others brought stories. The island started breathing again. One night, while going through a storage shed that somehow survived the fire, I found a box labeled Lucas. Inside were photos, letters, even a drawing I made when I was 7. A crayon-sketched version of Raven Rock with me in a cape standing on the lighthouse. She'd kept everything. Tucked under the stack was a letter she'd written but never sent. It read like a conversation. "If you're reading this, it means the island is yours, and I know you're probably overwhelmed. But I chose you because I knew you wouldn't see it as real estate. You'd see it as home. Don't let anyone take that from you, especially the ones who think they're smarter because they're louder." I folded the letter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Grief sneaks up on you like that. When the shouting stops and the threats are over, silence moves in like fog, and that's when you hear her voice again. Not from memory, from truth. The renovations took 4 months. During the rebuild, I started documenting everything, the repairs, the history, the transformation. At first, it was just a way to stay sane. But people started watching. I posted updates online. Before long, the project had its own audience. Comments poured in from strangers who said the island felt like something out of a novel. Others asked if they could visit. That's when the idea hit. Raven Rock wasn't meant to be mine alone. It could be a retreat, a refuge, a space for people who needed to breathe, to disappear for a weekend, to feel something real. I designed it with intention. A main guest cabin with huge windows facing the ocean. A communal kitchen stocked with handwritten recipes from locals. Trails that led to quiet spots I named after moments with my grandmother, like Apple Slice Hill, where she used to picnic, or Candlelight Cliff, where we watched thunderstorms together. And the lighthouse, I restored it. I didn't change a thing, structurally, just reinforced it, repainted it, and installed a solar system. It didn't need to function, it just needed to stand. Raven Rock reopened in spring, and the first guests arrived with wide eyes and heavier baggage than their suitcases. Artists, writers, burned-out teachers, one man fresh out of a divorce who spent 3 days doing nothing but drinking coffee and staring at the sea. They all left something behind. Not trash, not mess. But pieces of pain they didn't want to carry anymore. And in return, they planted things. Flowers, notes, time capsules. It became a trade: leave the weight, take the peace. One afternoon, as I was gathering driftwood near the southern beach, a woman approached me. Late 50s, warm eyes, a hesitant smile. "You're Lucas, right?" I nodded, unsure. "My name's Mary," she said. "I used to clean for your grandmother. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to see what you'd done." We sat on a log watching the tide roll in. She told me stories I'd never heard about how my grandmother once threatened to paddle out in a canoe to tell off a fishing boat that was too close to the seal nursery. How she made the world's worst cinnamon bread, but insisted on serving it anyway. How she used to say, "You don't build a home, you grow one." Before Mary left, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo of my grandmother standing in front of the lighthouse, one hand on her hip, the other holding a sign that read, "For the ones who don't belong anywhere else." I hung that photo in the main cabin the next day. Centered, framed, eternal. Raven Rock became more than a retreat. It became a movement. People started writing about it. Journalists reached out. One article in a travel magazine called it the island that healed me. I didn't want fame. I wanted meaning. And somehow that found me instead. But success has a strange echo. It brings out the past. A few weeks after the article dropped, I received a letter from a law firm. At first I braced myself. Another threat, another claim, but it wasn't legal. It was personal. It was from Sylvia, or at least her lawyer. She was still in jail awaiting trial, but she wanted to speak with me. My first instinct was to burn the letter. Let the past rot where it belonged. But something in me, curiosity, maybe pity, kept me from tossing it. I read it. She wanted a visit, just one. I have something to say she'd written, and it's not what you think. I didn't respond, not right away. Instead, I walked the island again, this time with different eyes. I watched the way the sun lit the rocks at dusk. I listened to the gulls scream over the waves. I thought about the boy I used to be, the one who never thought he'd matter enough to own anything, let alone land, let alone a legacy. And I wondered what kind of man he'd be if he said no to a dying voice from the past. Then I wondered what kind of man he'd be if he said yes. I had a choice to make. And no matter what I decided, it wouldn't be for Sylvia. It would be for me. I didn't rush the decision. I let it sit like rain soaking into the soil. Some choices can't be made in haste, not because they're complicated, but because they echo long after they're done. Visiting Sylvia in jail wasn't about answers. I didn't expect redemption. But I knew what regret tasted like, and I didn't want to carry another spoonful of it for the rest of my life. So I went. Not because she deserved it, because I did. The facility was gray, sterile, and loud in the quietest way. Buzzer's shoes squeaking on tile doors, clicking shut with finality. I sat at the table waiting. Then she walked in. Her once perfectly manicured image was gone. Her face was thinner, eyes sharper. There was no makeup, no jewelry, no carefully curated charm. Just Sylvia. Raw and real for the first time in my life. She didn't sit right away. She stood behind the chair, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You look like her," she said. No venom, just a strange kind of ache. I didn't answer. Didn't smile. I just waited. Eventually, she sank into the seat. "I'm not here to grovel," she said, and I almost laughed. Of course not. That wasn't her style. I wanted to explain. I said nothing. Let her fill the silence if she wanted it filled. "I hated that she chose you," she continued, voice low. "Not because you didn't deserve it, but because I knew I didn't." She looked down at her hands, fingers twitching like they remembered the weight of something she could no longer carry. "You ever feel like you're owed something just because you were there first, because you suffered longer?" I was the one who stayed with her when Dad left. I watched her fight through every failed business, every bankruptcy, every storm that blew the roof off that damn island. I thought that counted for something. She looked at me then, and for the first time there was no manipulation in her stare. Just the fragile pieces of a woman whose plans had burned as fast as my house did. "But she didn't choose me," she said, "because I turned bitter. And you," she trailed off, shaking her head, "you were everything she believed in. Quiet, thoughtful, honest. I envied that. Still do. It would have been easy to feel vindicated, to let her words wrap around my ego like armor. But all I felt was cold. Not anger, not pity, just the chill of understanding something too late. "I wanted to ruin you," she whispered, "but all I did was ruin myself." There it was, not an apology, but a confession. "I don't forgive you," I said, finally breaking my silence. "But I'm done carrying you." I stood chair scraping softly across the floor. "You don't live on Raven Rock, not even in memory." She didn't stop me, didn't argue, just sat there, shoulders curved inward like a crumbling wall. I walked away without looking back. That night, I stood at the edge of the cliff behind the lighthouse watching the stars. Raven Rock was quiet wind brushing through the trees like a lullaby. And for the first time since the will was read, I felt something settle. Not peace, but direction. The following weeks brought growth. Not metaphorical, literal. The island was alive again. Wildflowers sprouted in places they hadn't before. Guests brought seeds, stories, and strange coincidences that made Raven Rock feel like it was writing its own legend. A writer left behind a manuscript she'd never finished. A chef taught a workshop in the main cabin kitchen and ended up staying for 2 months, falling in love with a guest who fixed the plumbing. A boy sketched the cliffs in such detail we ended up using his artwork on all our brochures. The island became a haven for more than healing. It became fertile ground for rebirth. People didn't just leave lighter, they left inspired. And then came the letter. Not from a lawyer, not from Sylvia, from the state. Apparently, Raven Rock was home to a protected bird species nesting in the cliffs near the eastern ridge. Which was great news until I read the fine print. It meant limited access, environmental surveys, strict regulations. The land was mine, yes, but legally I'd need approval for everything from trail extensions to boat dock repairs. Bureaucracy had found me. At first I was frustrated. It felt like yet another test, another hand grabbing at the legacy I was still trying to build. But I remembered something my grandmother once told me when I was 9 and broke a ceramic lamp during a storm. When you love something, you protect it even from yourself. So I met with the environmental team. Biologists, inspectors, they expected resistance. What they got was cooperation. I offered space in the northern cabin for observation work. I even created a new trail, the Feather Path, leading to a safe lookout where guests could watch the birds without disrupting their habitat. Within months, Raven Rock became more than a retreat. It was now part of something greater. We hosted small ecology workshops, invited school groups, partnered with a conservation group to fund local cleanup efforts. What started as a conflict turned into community. That fall, I found myself staring at a guest book we kept in the main lodge. Page after page of handwritten messages, each one a testament to something unspoken. I remembered how to breathe here. This place gave me my voice back. I'm not broken anymore. And one sign simply, L, read, "She chose you. You chose us. Thank you for not selling." I never found out who wrote it, but I didn't need to. Raven Rock had become more than a story of inheritance and revenge. It was a sanctuary carved out of storm, rebuilt from ashes, and rooted in truth. My grandmother didn't give me the island to punish Sylvia. She gave it to me because she believed in what it could be in the right hands. And finally, I believed it too. Raven Rock didn't just survive, it evolved. And with it, so did I. I used to think the island was a relic, a strange piece of inheritance left to test me. But as seasons passed and people came and went, I started to see it differently. Not as something to protect, but as something that protected me. It wasn't a fortress, it was a mirror. And what it showed me was everything I'd buried under years of silence, doubt, and inherited shame. Spring faded into summer. The guests kept coming, each one carrying a different kind of weight. One woman, recently widowed, spent 5 mornings watching the sunrise from the lighthouse, never saying a word until the last day. When she left, she hugged me and whispered, "I remembered who I was up there." Another guest, a teenager kicked out by their parents for coming out, stayed for 2 weeks, mostly in the art cabin, painting rocks. When they left behind a mural on the back wall, an ocean of color with the words "Still here, still strong," in bold brushstrokes. I never asked people to tell me their stories. But they offered them anyway, sometimes in words, sometimes in gestures, sometimes in silence that hummed louder than conversation. The island was no longer just mine. It belonged to every broken, hopeful, tired, or searching soul that set foot on it, including me. One evening, as I was closing the tool shed, Marcus returned. I hadn't seen him in months. He'd gone back to his security work, traveling across the country. But there he was, leaning against the fence like he'd never left, holding a coffee thermos and wearing that same knowing grin. "Heard you turned the island into a sanctuary," he said. "Figured I should see it before you start charging admission for sunsets." We sat by the fire pit that night, watching flames curl against the dark. He listened as I told him everything: the environmental designation, the guest book, the mural, even the letter from Sylvia. He was quiet for a long while, then said, "You know, most people inherit money or stuff. You inherited healing. That's a rare thing to carry, even rarer to share." I didn't say anything, but his words settled into my chest like a warm stone. The next morning, he asked to stay for a while. Not as security, not as backup, just as someone who needed the quiet. I gave him the caretaker's cabin. He fixed the roof without being asked. It felt like balance, like roots deepening. By the end of summer, we began receiving letters from people who hadn't visited yet, just heard about the island and hoped one day they could. A woman wrote from her hospital bed. Another from overseas. One teenager wrote in colored pencil, "My mom says we can't afford to come, but if I close my eyes, I pretend I'm there." That one hit hard. So I started something new, a fund supported by donations from past guests. We called it the Raven Rock Circle. Every quarter, we offered fully covered visits for people who needed it most. No strings, no spotlight, just a place to exhale. The island responded in kind. I'm not sure how else to explain it, but it felt like the place had its own rhythm, its own voice. Every time we gave more, it gave back. A new spring bubbled up near the old hiking trail. A storm tore down the last dead trees, clearing space for new ones. The lighthouse, once dim and crumbling, stood taller after every repair, almost proud. It was as if the island had waited its whole life to be seen, to be chosen for what it really was, not a piece of property, but a breathing legacy. And then one night in early autumn, I received a call. The kind you don't expect. The kind that twists the air around you. Sylvia was dying, liver failure, fast and aggressive. Her lawyer reached out again, not for legal matters this time, but personal ones. "She's asking for you," he said. I didn't answer right away. I sat in the guest lounge, lights low, fire crackling, hands wrapped around a tea I hadn't touched. I thought about the last time I saw her behind thick glass eyes, hollow but stubborn. I thought about her telling me she envied me. Not my success, my peace. I knew why she was calling. Not for forgiveness, for closure, maybe to apologize, maybe to blame me one last time. It didn't really matter. The question wasn't about her, it was about me. Who did I want to be in that moment? The person who walked away clean, never looking back, or the person who sat with the past and faced it fully? So I went. She was at a hospice center, small and clean and humming with the smell of lavender and antiseptic. I found her in a room with a window cracked open. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted winter wasn't far off. She was thinner than I remembered, smaller, almost like the bitterness had burned her from the inside out. Her eyes opened when I stepped in. "You came," she said. Her voice was barely there. I nodded. "I don't have long," she added, as if we were catching up over lunch. I pulled a chair beside her bed. We sat in silence for a while. No accusations, no rehashing the past, just breath and space. Then she said, "I thought winning meant getting everything. Turns out it means letting go." I wasn't sure what she expected me to say. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to witness that truth spoken aloud. She reached under the blanket and pulled out a small box. "This is the only thing I kept," she whispered. It belonged to her. Inside was a locket my grandmother's. Silver, tarnished, but still intact. I remembered it from childhood. She used to wear it when she gardened. I wanted to sell it once Sylvia said, eyes fluttering shut. But something stopped me, maybe guilt, maybe memory. Maybe I just didn't want to lose all of her. I took the box, not because I needed it, but because I knew it was her way of saying goodbye. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. We existed in that room as two people who'd finally laid their weapons down. She died 2 days later. Quietly. No drama, no headlines, just a woman who ran out of battles. I brought the locket back to Raven Rock and hung it on a nail inside the lighthouse, not as a trophy, not as a warning, as a reminder that even the hardest hearts crack open eventually, even bitterness has an end. That winter, the island snowed for the first time in years. Guests built snowmen with seaweed hair and driftwood arms. We served cider by the fire. Someone read poems out loud. And in that stillness, that wild frozen quiet, I understood something simple but deep. Raven Rock didn't save me. It made space for me to save myself. And in doing so, it made space for everyone else too. The snow melted slowly that year, like the island didn't want to let go of the quiet. Raven Rock had become more than a place by then. It was a rhythm, a pulse, a space where people remembered who they were without the noise of everything else. And even though the wind still howled and storms still came, there was calm at the center of it all. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that lawyer's office almost 2 years ago, stunned by an inheritance I didn't ask for and hunted by a bitter woman who'd rather burn the world than accept a no. That man had been cautious, tired, unsure. The man I was now knew what it meant to hold peace without apology. Knew that healing wasn't loud and redemption never came with fireworks. It came in the quiet moments, in the way people exhaled when they arrived, in the way they lingered when it was time to leave. Spring brought new visitors and a few familiar faces. One day, Marcus brought his younger sister, someone I'd only heard about in stories. She stayed for a week, barely spoke, and left a hand-carved wind chime on the porch of her cabin. Another time, a mother and son arrived after losing their home to a fire. They spent hours walking the beach, collecting shells, building small forts of driftwood, like they were reclaiming structure in a life that had collapsed. One morning, I found the boy had etched a single word into the sand in front of the lighthouse safe. I didn't take a picture. I didn't want to freeze it. I wanted to feel it in real time, let it wash over me like the tide that eventually took it back. By summer, the Raven Rock Circle had expanded. Guests began bringing others, friends, family, strangers who'd become something more after shared loss. The retreat wasn't advertised anymore. It didn't need to be. People found it through whispers, through stories passed in hospital rooms over coffees and midnight messages to someone who once came and left different. The waiting list grew, but so did the island's capacity, not in buildings, but in spirit. We started offering week-long volunteer sessions where former guests helped prepare the grounds, cook meals, repair trail markers. It wasn't about labor, it was about belonging. I started calling the island a tidekeeper, something that held the rhythm of people's grief and joy, fear and growth. It made space for both. And as I walked the paths each morning, coffee in hand, boots wet from dew, I felt more connected than I ever had in any city or room or conversation before. The island didn't ask for perfection. It asked for presence. And in return, it gave clarity. One evening in late summer, I received a letter that didn't come through the usual mail route. It was handwritten, folded into an envelope that smelled faintly of wildflowers. Inside was a single page and a photograph. The letter was from someone named Eleanor, a woman I didn't know, who claimed to have been my grandmother's friend during her younger years. The photo showed the two of them standing in front of a cabin barefoot and smiling, holding mugs of something hot. The letter read, "She always said if she couldn't build a future for herself, she'd build one for someone else." She never talked about wealth. She talked about legacy, about places that mattered more after she was gone. Raven Rock wasn't her gift to you. It was her way of letting the world know she trusted you to give it back. I stared at that line for a long time. Giving it back? It wasn't it. Not just the island. The healing. The hope. The reminder that not everything had to be loud to matter. Not everything had to be big to last. I framed the photo and placed it beside the guest book. Guests noticed. Some asked. Most didn't. But everyone looked at it like it held a secret they already knew deep down. In fall, we hosted our first reunion retreat, past guests returning to share what had changed, what had stayed the same. Stories unfolded by the firelight under stars and early morning walks and late-night whispers. One guest read a poem about a dream where the lighthouse turned into a tree and the waves sang lullabies. Another stood in front of the group and said, "This place made me realize I didn't need to be fixed, just seen." I didn't speak that night. I didn't need to. The island spoke through them. Winter returned again, softer this time. Snow brushed the rooftops. The lighthouse light still flickered steady and quiet. I often walked to the northern cliffs in the early mornings, watching the ocean breathe. Sometimes I'd bring coffee, sometimes just questions. I didn't always find answers, but I always found stillness. That was enough. And one morning, I found something else. A small wooden box left at the foot of the lighthouse door. No note, just initials carved into the lid, SMW Sylvia May Wyatt. Inside was the silver locket, the same one I'd left hanging inside. Only now it held something new. A tiny folded paper yellowed with time. It read, "Some debts can't be paid, but some burdens can be laid down. Thank you. I don't know who left it there, maybe the hospice nurse, maybe her lawyer. Maybe just time finding its way back to me." I didn't take it inside. I buried the box under the lighthouse steps near the roots of an old pine tree that had never stopped growing. That was the day I knew the story had come full circle. Not the end. Just a quiet, solid, close to a chapter that began with confusion, fire, and fear. What came next didn't need to be grand, just honest, just rooted. The island stands, still and strong. The ocean still hums. The wind still carries laughter, sometimes tears, always memories. And me, I'm just the keeper. The one who showed up, stayed when it got hard, and chose not to sell what couldn't be priced. I don't need to be remembered, just trusted. The way she trusted me. So if you ever hear about a place that feels like the earth exhaled, that holds stories in its trees and healing in its silence, maybe it's Raven Rock. Maybe it's somewhere like it. A place that doesn't fix you. Just makes space for the parts of you the world tried to erase. And if you ever go bring nothing but truth, the island will carry the rest. Story 2. She believes we love her according to a covert recording my brother made of my parents. We simply adore her money. My heart broke when he emailed me the video, so I stopped talking to him. My dad called a few weeks later, enraged. "Where is our allowance?" I grinned and remarked, "I never imagined hearing my parents say something like this. I always thought they were in love with me, not in a fanciful manner. There were issues in our family. Yes, but I believed that we were strong in our core. The oldest daughter was me, the accountable one, the one who constantly lent a hand. I put in a lot of work and developed a solid career, and since I wanted to, I gave. Family does that after all. I paid their rent when they were short, when their vehicle malfunctioned. When they wanted to travel but couldn't afford it, I covered the cost of repairs. I brought it about. I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't keep track. I never asked for anything in exchange. However, a video that my brother Dylan sent me broke my heart. When the text arrived, it was already late. I wasn't that close to Dylan. They showered him with affection. He was the golden child. I simply ensured that tasks were completed. He didn't say much. This is something you must see. The video was attached. I pressed the play button. At first, it appeared as though he had placed his phone somewhere without anyone noticing because the screen was dark and the angle was low. The silence was broken by my parents' voices. She believes that we adore her. The voice of my mother. My dad laughed. We simply adore her money. A shiver went down my back. She is really naive. My mother continued to laugh as if it were an inside joke, constantly giving money away as if it were nothing. She believes that if she didn't pay for everything, we would always have her over. Dad chuckled once more. Until she isn't, she is useful. My breathing stopped. The video was brief, a minute perhaps. However, I kept hearing it in my mind. My heart was racing as I sat motionless gazing at my phone. I repeatedly played it, trying to process, attempting to persuade myself that perhaps I had misinterpreted. Perhaps it was a cruel joke. However, no. They spoke clearly. They were actually laughing. I was never adored by them. I was able to help them and they enjoyed it. I had been donating to them for years without even recognizing it. Not that I was a daughter. I was a wallet. I responded to Dylan's text. Is this authentic? He answered right away. Indeed, I did record it today. I believed you ought to be aware. I sat there with my fingers hurting from holding my phone so tightly. I ought to have been upset. I ought to have yelled. But my only emotion was icy, naive incredulity. Then I felt a change in myself. I refrained from texting my folks. I did not make a call. I didn't go up against them. What was the purpose? They refused to say they were sorry. I wouldn't get their love overnight. Now the truth was out. For weeks, I remained mute. I didn't answer their calls. Their texts went unanswered by me. I disappeared. Do you know what took place? Nothing. There was no check-in. Nobody showed up to look. Until my dad called, no one inquired about my well-being. My screen flashed his number. I had seen the name countless times before. I allowed it to ring. Then it rang once more, and once more. At last I responded. Hi there. His tone was already abrasive. Where is our allowance? It nearly made me chuckle. That was the purpose of this. Not me. Not why I had vanished. Not if I was all right. Only the cash. I grinned. Permission. This month you haven't sent anything. He lost his temper. We need to pay our expenses. You are aware of that. I allowed the quiet to linger between us. My heart is thumping. Then I spoke in a steady, calm voice. Oh, you mean the money you receive from your unloved daughter? A long pause ensued. He cleared his throat after that. I have no idea what you're discussing. The arrogance almost made me admire it. I let out a brief, sour laugh. Correct. You don't listen, of course. He seemed to be trying to sound reasonable as his voice grew softer. You can't just shut us off. I'm not sure what you're thinking. We are related. I tightened my jaw. Family correct. I reflected on all the times I had stepped in to assist. Every minute I had prioritized their needs over my own, every sacrifice I had made. How many times had I told myself that excellent daughters did things like this, that the work was worthwhile because of their love? I reflected about my mother's laughing and the video. I inhaled deeply. I'm not interrupting anyone. I said, I'm simply redistributing my money, because I'm only good for my money, you know. His mind was working so hard that I could almost hear it. Then he sneered. You're exaggerating. Is it dramatic? I had an inside sensation. Hurry up. How can I be so dramatic with a firm voice, I asked. Because the truth was finally told to me, because I made the decision to stop being used. His annoyance was coming through, right now. That isn't the situation. Don't pretend to be a victim here. You were reared by us, we looked after you, and now you simply leave us when we need assistance. I laughed once more, but it was a piercing, incredulous chuckle. For me, what have you done? Quietly, I inquired. One more quiet. I waited. His breaths and his attempts to think of something were audible to me. However, since they hadn't taken any action, there was nothing. I gave myself a nod. I had that thought. Avoid doing this. He made another attempt, trying to sound reasonable by changing the tone of his voice. You're going overboard. We are related. No, I said plainly. We're not. I hung up after that. I sat there looking at nothing for a long time with my phone still in my hand. I should have been depressed, but I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I felt liberated. I had freedom. After I hung up, there was a thick quiet. I knew it wasn't over, even though my phone was in my lap with the screen black. Not everyone, including my parents, let things go. I was correct. It began modestly. I ignored a couple more texts and missed calls. Dylan then sent me a message. Mom is furious. Dad as well. They're accusing you of cruelty. I took a long look at the message before responding. Do you believe that I am? Then he didn't respond immediately. No, I believe you're not correct. I was somewhat reassured by that, but I knew it wouldn't last. My mother eventually got in touch a few days later. It was a lengthy, dramatic voicemail rather than a text. I'm not sure what's bothering you. Her voice trembled as if she were about to cry as she started. We have always supported you. You have always been loved by us. Suddenly, you abruptly interrupted us. Are you aware of the damage this is causing to us? We're having trouble, you are aware of that. Furthermore, you refuse to answer the phone. I didn't reply and erased the note. Anger then replaced the guilt trip. This is my dad's voicemail again. I'm not sure what game you're playing, but this is abhorrent. You were reared by us. For you, we made sacrifices. And you pay us back like this. You believe that your parents don't like you enough right now. Since you didn't get your way, you're acting like a spoilt brat and having a fit. Come of age, remove. The accusation then began. They must have changed their strategy after seeing I wasn't breaking. Family relatives I hadn't spoken to in years began to contact me. A message was issued by a scarcely new auntie. Your parents are inconsolable. They have no idea why you are treating them in this way. You ought to be embarrassed. A relative. Whoa. Money truly has the power to transform you. So depressing. My grandmother left a voicemail even though she had never contacted me before. Her voice was tremulous and feeble. I'm not sure what's going on, my love, but please forgive your parents for whatever they did. Life is too short. I nearly fell for that one. Nearly. Dylan then gave a call. I took it up. They're going crazy. Without bothering to say hi, he said, they're claiming to be starving and that you have abandoned them. I gave a snort. Going hungry. Do they mean it extremely serious? When I visited yesterday, my mother was sobbing while sitting on the couch and stating that they didn't even have enough money for groceries. They may have to sell the house according to Dad. I tightened my jaw. Dylan, I examined their financial records. They have money saved up. They're simply angry. My money can no longer be wasted on pointless things. I understand, he mumbled. I merely wanted to caution you. They are discussing visiting your place of employment. I straightened my posture. What? They know where you work, but they don't know where you currently reside. Maybe meeting them in person will remind you of your responsibility if you refuse to answer their calls, Dad said. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Somehow I was astonished, even though I shouldn't have been. I said, thanks for telling me. Indeed, they arrived 2 days later. Melissa, one of my coworkers, knocked on my door while I was at my office. Downstairs, an elderly couple is requesting you. According to them, it's urgent. My stomach turned over. I tried to look composed. How do they appear? Older, late 50s, perhaps, in the early 1960s. The woman is in tears. The man appears enraged. They refused to identify themselves, merely stated that they were related. She was crying, of course. My mom had a knack for playing the victim. I told security not to let them up as I slowly exhaled. Melissa nodded but arched her eyebrow. I understand. After 5 minutes, my phone began to buzz, a message from an unidentified number. You will not even notice us. This is how callous you truly are. This is what a daughter does, then another. We're being humiliated by you. All we want to do is chat. We will wait all day if you do not come down. I didn't respond. How long they waited is a mystery to me. Security verified they were gone by midday. However, it didn't end there. I received a call from HR a few days later. With an uneasy expression, my manager stated, "We had a complaint filed against you." When your parents called, they said you were mistreating their money. I blinked. I'm sorry. They said that you abruptly cut them off out of cruelty after managing their funds for years. It nearly made me chuckle. That's crazy. Though we still need to document it, we figured as much. We may have to file a lawsuit if they continue to harass you here, a lawsuit against my own parents. I never imagined it would get this bad. I sat in my flat that night with my phone face down next to me staring at the ceiling. I'd always felt that I was important and that I belonged to a family. I gave that because I was in love, and that they gave that love back. However, none of that was true. They didn't consider me a daughter. I served as a resource, and suddenly that resource was no longer available. They were going in a spiral. I had no idea what would happen next. However, I was aware of one thing. I was not going to back down. The following twist was swift. A week later, Dylan texted me when I was seated at my desk. A lawyer was engaged by Mom and Dad. What I typed back made my stomach drop. They're telling everyone that they're going to sue you, but I'm not sure. They're probably attempting to coerce you into giving them money. My heart was racing as I gazed at the message. Would they be able to do that? I was aware of their need, but this was something else entirely. I got to work on my research. It turns out that several states have legislation pertaining to filial obligation. They might even attempt to sue me for financial support if they were sincere. I looked up my state's legislation. Fortunately, we weren't among those who enforced them, but that didn't stop them from trying something different. And they did. I received a formal letter in the mail a few days later. It came from their attorney. Stop and stop from financial desertion. It nearly made me chuckle. Financial desertion. As if I had legal responsibility for two people who just refused to handle their own finances. I contacted my own attorney. He sighed when he finished reading the letter. This is utterly absurd. They've got no case. All they want to do is frighten you. I also had that thought. Then things worsened. That night, Dylan called in a hushed voice. I believe they are attempting to target your accounts. I held onto my phone. What they are claiming to have co-signed a document for you years ago. By themselves. They may be claiming that they are still legally entitled to your money. My blood froze. Long ago, while I was in college and needed their name on an apartment lease, I did have a joint account with them. I had completely forgotten about it. I had accounts of my own. My personal savings now. However, they might attempt to tamper with my funds if that previous account was still open and linked to my name. The worst aspect was revealed to me when I contacted my bank right after hanging up with Dylan. I'd completely forgotten about the prior account. All this time, they had been using it. I had ceased looking at it years ago, but my name was still there. It was merely a forgotten account that existed in the background of my existence. However, my parents had been using it to transfer money. It was linked to thousands of dollars in debt. Additionally, I was legally responsible because my name was still linked. My heart was pounding in my chest. I urgently need my name removed from that account. The bank representative paused. Unfortunately, because it's a joint account, you can't delete yourself without the other person's consent. I tightened my jaw. I'll guess. In other words, my parents. That's right. After hanging up, I sat silently with my brain spinning. This had been lined up just right. I had simply walked into it. I returned Dylan's call. They had been utilizing a joint account that is rather old. I might be responsible for their debt. He muttered curses to himself. You must find a lawyer quickly. I was aware of that beforehand. However, what transpired next caught me off guard. I awoke the very following morning to an email alert. A lot of money. I had just lost many $1,000s in personal funds. Not the shared account, but my own. I called the bank in a panic, and after an hour on wait, I received a response that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't me who had moved the funds. My mom was the one. She had gained access somehow. I had no idea how to do it. From an old password, perhaps? I neglected to alter. Perhaps because she had just enough knowledge to persuade the bank that she was in a position of power. Perhaps because I never considered checking, and she had already set up access years ago. But she did it nevertheless. I wasn't going to overlook the fact that she had taken from me. My hands were shaking as I sat there looking at my bank statement. Thousands of money were lost. I had saved, worked for, and depended on this money. And it had been stolen by my own mother. I gave the bank another call. I spoke sharply. This was not approved. It was theft. The representative sounded uneasy. We'll start an inquiry. It might take some time though because she is a known relative and might have had access before. Is it time I was pressed for time? I immediately called my lawyer after hanging up. I gritted my teeth and muttered, "She stole from me. I want it returned." He let out a sigh. This is a severe matter. We will have to file charges. I paused for a half second. File a complaint against my own mom. Then I remembered the film, the laughs, and how they had taken advantage of me for years. The unfounded charges. They had the audacity to attempt to sue me when it was they who had been exploiting me all along. I inhaled deeply. Do it on the same day. I retrieved all of my financial records. I went through every paper, every email, everything. I was prepared to bury them if they chose to play dirty. Oh, did I discover anything the previous joint account? It had more than simply debt. Years ago, my parents had taken out a loan in both of our names. Never once have I seen a dime of it. They had utilized it, signed for it, and never reimbursed it. For years, the balance had been steadily increasing. My credit would have been ruined if I hadn't discovered this sooner. I was ill. I gave Dylan a call. Not all of them are leeches. They are criminals. He remained silent for a while. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I was fully aware of what I was going to do. I started by freezing all of my accounts and changing the passwords and security settings. The bank verified that my mother used an old linked account to obtain access. I never considered disconnecting one. I secured everything. I then filed a theft report. My own money was not legally accessible to my mother. It wasn't enough that the bank consented to file a fraud action. A formal demand letter was sent by my lawyer. You risk criminal prosecution if you don't return the stolen funds right away. My father called me 2 days later. You made the police call yourself Mom. He spoke in an angry tone. I was stolen from by you. My voice was calm as I spoke. Over the phone, his breath came quickly. We are related. No, I said icily. Family members don't steal. No family member takes out a loan under another person's name. People are not used by family. Quiet. Then he committed his greatest error. You believe you're quite intelligent. He lowered his voice to a perilous whisper. What we can do to you is unknown to you. Want to go dirty? All right, see what occurs next. He ended the call. My heart was racing as I sat there. I was not going to disregard that threat. I sent my lawyer the call recording. He called that intimidation. By the end of the week, we will be submitting a restraining order application. I had stopped the joint account, removed my name from it, and charged my mother with fraud. Filed for a restraining order against them both, and formally reported the stolen money to law enforcement. The fallout was swift. The fraud case proceeded more quickly than I anticipated. The bank decided in my favor because there was convincing proof that she had entered my account without authorization. Before they progressed to prosecution, my mother was given 7 days to refund the money. She didn't give it back. The police then intervened. My dad deleted all of my messages, voicemails, and phone calls the day she was arrested. Our lives are being ruined by you. How could you harm your own mother in this way? That money was necessary. You gave us no option. No option. Correct. They had no choice but to lie and take out fake loans since they were stealing from me. Later, Dylan gave me a call. He spoke in a weak voice. Mom is incarcerated. I let out a breath. I am aware that Dad made every effort to have the charges dismissed. He tried to guilt-trip me, called relatives, and even showed up outside my former place of employment before being ejected by security. It was unsuccessful. They couldn't afford a lawyer. Not enough cash to buy their way out. Karma then struck even more forcefully. Do you recall the previous loan I had? The bank pursued me first since my parents had fallen behind, until my attorney presented them with proof that I had never consented to it, that someone had faked my signature. Deception. Fraud in banks. They were looked into. More fraudulent behavior was discovered during the case. My parents have already done this to other people, it turns out. A little bit here and there. Enough to keep people from noticing. However, it was a big one. Bank fraud is also not forgiven by banks. They were heavily sued. The home is gone. The vehicle was repossessed. They had taken everything to settle their bills. Dylan left home. He no longer desired to interact with them. And me, I turned to leave. I didn't see them again. My dad was fighting to make ends meet in a tiny apartment when I last heard from him. Mom? She was released on probation after serving time in jail. However, nobody trusted her anymore because of her record. They believed they had lost their golden life, as well as myself. I was at last truly free. Story 3? When I took a final exam, my parents said they couldn't keep my son for an hour because they were too busy. They made the 2-hour drive the following day to take my brother's children to a water park. So I interrupted them. They contacted in a panic 3 months later. Why did you not send the money? I answered. I was constantly aware of my parents' partiality. Growing up, I witnessed it, but I reasoned that perhaps as I grew older, things would level out. My brother and I might be viewed as equals by our parents once we were all older. I was mistaken. My younger brother Jake has always been the best kid. If he made a mistake, they would not consider it wrong. An excuse was always available. When he needed something, my parents went out of their way to provide it. I was merely present, the accountable one. The one has less of a need, the one they could ignore as they knew I would work things out on my own. I ignored it for years. They then showed me my exact position one day, and I do believe them at last. Lucas, my 5-year-old kid, has me as his only parent. Before he was even born, his father fled. Thus, from the beginning, it has only been the two of us. Being a single parent is difficult. I recently returned to school to complete my degree in order to obtain a better career, and I work full-time. Even though it has been difficult, I persevere because I want my son to live a better life than I had. I rarely ask for assistance, but on this specific day, I was in need of it. A big final exam was approaching, one of those crucial tests that could determine whether a student passes or fails. I was compelled to be there. As usual, babysitter Lucas was unable to attend due to an unforeseen circumstance. I was rushing. I tried calling a few friends, but no one answered. I began to panic. Then I reasoned that I should ask my parents. Their residence is 15 minutes distant. They have retired. They enjoy saying things. Tell us if you need anything at all. I called them then. Me. Hey, I need someone to keep Lucas for an hour so I can study for my exam tomorrow. Are you able to assist Mom? We'd love to, but we're just too busy, my dear. I stopped. What are you busy with? Oh, I see. Mom, is everything okay? Yes, we are simply worn out. We intended to take tomorrow off. Jake, perhaps you can question him correctly. Jake, who never offers me assistance? Jake, who sits on his ass playing video games while his wife handles all the real parenting? I asked him anyhow. He was too busy, of course. I had to ask a classmate to change the time of my exam. I just about made it. It was all a nightmare of worry, but I made it through. My cousin then texted me the very next day. A cousin. Hello, I saw Jake's kids at the water park with your parents. Are you also present? It took me 2 readings. The same folks who were too worn out to keep an eye on my baby for an hour had made the 2-hour drive to a water park to drop off my brother's children. I became enraged. I gave my mother a call. Me. You couldn't watch Lucas yesterday because you were too exhausted. However, you spent 2 hours driving to a water park today. Quiet. Then the justifications began. Mom, don't be like that, honey. Me. Such as you know, Jake's kids don't spend much time outside Mom. For them, we wanted to produce something unique. My child and I. Not important. That's unfair, Mom. We don't prefer Jake despite what you always believe. I chuckled. Me, it isn't. Then describe this. Tell me why you were unable to spend an hour with me. But you had the stamina to keep Jake's kids entertained all day. More justifications, more deception, more attempts to change the situation. I was the villain then. I was finished. I ended the call. That night, I decided something. I left without making contact. I had had enough of begging for morsels of attention. I refused to let them treat my son like a second-class citizen, in contrast to Jake's children. What more do you know? I had been giving them $300 a month to assist pay their bills for the last 4 years. They relied on it because it made a difference, even though it wasn't a tremendous amount. I never gave it much thought. Every time they mentioned they were having trouble, I wanted to help. But not anymore. I ceased sending money. I didn't answer their calls. Initially, nothing occurred. 3 months or so later, I received a voicemail from my mother. She spoke haltingly. We must speak, my love. Things are getting increasingly tight, and we haven't received the money this month. Give me a call back, please. I didn't. She gave another call a few days later. Why didn't you send the money? Mom, I have been occupied. Mom. Too busy. Yes, for example, when I asked you to keep an eye on Lucas. Quiet. Then she began to stutter. Mom. We didn't know you were still upset over that, honey. Me, I'm not angry. I've just come to the conclusion that I should give priority to those that value me. Mom. However, we are family, though. I took a moment to consider that. I asked, are we, or do you only say it when you're in need of cash? She snapped. She shouted, referred to me as self-centered, claimed that I was punishing them for a minor miscommunication. I let her continue. Then she eventually lost her steam. Calmly, I said, "I'm just doing as you say. I learned how to treat family from you, Mom." I hung up after that. A few weeks later, I learned through rumors that my parents needed to get money from Jake. You know what No Jake said? It seems that he and his spouse were having financial difficulties and were unable to provide assistance. My parents were now in a dire situation. At that point, the real fun started. I anticipated some sort of reprisal after I hung up on my mother. Perhaps another irate phone call. My dad might become involved. They might instead arrive at my door. Quiet. Days went by. Next a week, next two. I refused to tell lies. It was strange. They were a constant in my life for years despite the fact that it was largely depressing. It seemed like I was suddenly free of a burden when I cut them off. It was lighter. However, I was acquainted with my parents. They weren't the type to simply take the repercussions. My phone did really ring a month later. This time it wasn't my mother. Jake was the one. On my screen, I gazed at his name. I wasn't close to him. We hadn't been. We didn't actually fight. Simply put, our worlds were different. The carefree one had always been Jake, the family's baby. Someone else fixed things for him if life ever became tough. The call was sent to voicemail by me. Then he sent Jake a text. "Can we talk, please? It's important, Jake." An hour passed before I received a response. "What are you looking for?" My phone rang once more a few seconds later. With a sigh, I lifted myself up. "What, Jake?" "Whoa. All right, are you still angry?" "I'm not angry. I'm occupied." "Jake." "Correct. Look. If it wasn't serious, I wouldn't call. Then me. Jake, get right to the point." I sigh. Dad and Mom are having problems. I remained silent. I simply listened to him speak. They have fallen behind on their mortgage, Jake. Like far behind. They claimed that they could lose the residence. It was there, Jake. They wanted money from me, but I refused. "But Jake, you said no. I am unable to assist them. We have 2 children. The cost of daycare is outrageous, as well as our mortgage." Me. "So what, Jake? You think I'll fix it?" "Yes, you did send them money earlier, don't you?" I genuinely laughed. "Me, you understand that they put themselves in this predicament, Jake. Hurry up, parents are present." Me, when they abandoned me to struggle only to complete an exam, were they behaving like parents? When they chose your children over mine, were they behaving like parents? Keep quiet, I'll guess, Jake. You weren't informed about that, no. I told him the truncated version. The phone call when they learned the money was gone, the water park excursion, the childcare, and the excuses. Jake remained silent for a while after I was done. Then he let out a sigh. "Jake." "Yes, they sound like that." Me. "Then Jake, you realize why this isn't my issue. However, they will lose their home. I'm on them." "Jake, are you simply going to allow it to occur?" "Yes, my mother gave me another call 2 days later. She didn't sound angry this time. Her voice was broken." "Mom, please, sweetheart, we are unsure about what to do." Me. "Since Jake's children are the ones who really matter, perhaps you might ask them." "That's unfair." "Mom, I don't. Was abandoning me when I was in need of assistance." "Mom. However, we were unaware of how deeply you upset me. You were aware you simply didn't give a damn." She broke down in tears. "We may have to relocate, Mom. There is nowhere for us to go. I'm not sure how we're going to proceed." I let out a little sigh. I thought about lending a hand. I understood what it was like to struggle not for them. Then I recalled all the times I had to solve problems on my own. I was always the least important person. They always expected me to take care of things, since I always did. "Me, I'm hoping things goes well for you." I then hung up. That should be the end of it, I thought. I hoped my folks would finally understand after all of this. They did, however, have one final ploy. I received a letter in the mail 2 weeks later. I took it open. I froze after reading the first few paragraphs. It came from an attorney. I was being sued by my parents. I gazed intently at the letter. I had my own parents suing me. For what purpose, I find it by sifting through the legalese. Because I had been providing them with regular financial support for years, they were asserting that I was entitled to continue providing them with financial support because it was a verbal commitment. In fact, they were attempting to impose a legal requirement on me to continue sending the money. My stomach dropped. There was more to this than despair. It was war. I didn't give them a call. I didn't send a text. I drove directly to their residence. In fact, my mother appeared delighted to see me when she opened the door. As if I had come to apologize, she thought. "Mom." Oh dear, I knew you would get past me. Do you have a mental breakdown? Her expression fell. Dad entered the corridor. Be mindful of your tone, Dad. Me. My tone, Given that my own parents are attempting to sue me, I believe I have every right to be a little upset. We didn't want to, Mom, but you gave us no other option. Me, no option. You had all the options. When I needed you, you decided to let me down. You are now attempting to legally compel me to look after you. Before we relied on that money, Dad, you were assisting us. Me, I have no problem with that. You cannot simply cut off family members in that way, Mom. Me. You interrupted me initially. She fell silent. I gave a headshake. Me, put the lawsuit on hold. If you agree to provide financial support for us, Dad will drop it. I genuinely laughed. Me. Do you believe you have any influence here? It's you who's drowning. It's you who require me. You'll be taken to court by Mom. Me. Proceed. Let's check the judge's reaction to your attempt to legally coerce your own daughter into paying your expenses. For it, they had no answer. Mom broke down once more. We will lose everything, Mom. Me. Perhaps you ought to have considered that earlier. I felt like you didn't care about me. I walked out after turning around. They made no attempt to stop me. I talked to a lawyer a week later. After glancing at the case, she burst out laughing. Attorney, they have nothing to stand on. Apparently, there had to be evidence that I had specifically committed to continue paying them indefinitely for verbal agreements to be upheld in court, which I never did, of course. My attorney informed them in a cease and desist letter that I would file a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress if they persisted. Within 48 hours, the lawsuit was dropped. In an instant, my parents were declared defeated. That seemed to be the end of it. I hoped they would eventually stop bothering me. However, my cousin referred to me as cousin a month later. Have you any updates on your parents? Me now, what cousin? The house was sold. My heart stopped beating. Cousin. They had no other option. They were on the verge of going into foreclosure. Jake is their new roommate. I started laughing. The same Jake who claimed he was unable to provide them any assistance. The same Jake who up until now had been too busy to help them. His issue was them. I had no idea how wonderfully that would work out. For the first time in my life, I stared at Lucas playing on the floor after hanging up the phone. I knew I had made the right decision, and I felt liberated. My phone rang once more a month after my parents moved in with Jake. He was the one. I didn't answer. Jake was followed by a text. Give me a call. It's crucial. I choose to disregard it. My phone rang once more an hour later. I responded this time because I was curious. Me. What you must return them, Jake. My drink almost choked me. Me. Please pardon me, Jake. Parents, you must accept them. This is not something I can accomplish. I relax taking in more of this than I ought to have. Me. What's wrong? They are now living with you, even though you previously said that you couldn't afford to help them. Jake, isn't that precisely what they desired? We're going crazy because of them. Oh, they must have been me. It sounds rough. Jake, they gripe about everything. The food we purchase doesn't appeal to them. All day long they occupy the living room. My wife is always being guilt-tripped by Mom for not taking care of them, as well as Dad. God, my dad is always trying to correct my children. I smiled at myself. Whoa, startling. You don't comprehend me, Jake. Yes, I do. I spent my entire life dealing with them. Jake, you're only getting a taste. Please take them for me. Me not taking place. Jake, hurry up. You are aware of their nature. Me? Yes, I cut them off for that reason. In fact, Jake began to beg, pleading. Jake, look, I understand now, all right. They were usually rude to you. Now I see it. I can't live like this, though, please. I took a moment to consider that. That sounds like an issue with you, I remarked gently. I then hung up. I received updates from my cousin over the course of the following month. It was magnificent. Jake was at the end of his rope with his wife. Mom continued to treat Jake's wife like a servant and demand respect. Dad was constantly shouting at their children, attempting to chastise them as if they were his own. They quarreled all the time. It was a combat zone every day. Then Jake lost it one day. He ejected them. No warning, no contingency. Simply gather their belongings and deliver them to a motel. Mom gave me another call. She wasn't just crying this time, she was going crazy. Jake left us, Mom. We have nowhere to go. Me? Whoa, that must be terrible. We'll end up homeless, Mom. Me? That's difficult. Mom will do anything. Let us stay for a little while, please. I breathed out slowly, then I said emotionlessly, Mom, you made your decisions. We are family, though. Me? Oh, we're not. That was the last time I hung up. They were left without a home money or someone to help them. They had been using me for years. Believed that I would always be there regardless of how poorly they treated me. They believed that I would never leave, yet I did. And nobody was left to save them when they eventually had to deal with the fallout from their own deeds. Every bridge has been destroyed by them. I was no longer their safety net. Lucas and I were doing well. I got a better job. I no longer feel like I'm dragging dead weight because we relocated to a nicer place. I don't talk to Jake. It is likely that he is still recuperating from the ordeal he endured. According to what I've heard, my folks are barely making ends meet while alternating between budget motels and long-term accommodations. Do I apologize? No. Because you should believe someone when they tell you exactly where you are in their life.